the sheer juxtaposition to the Scotland that I knew and the Scotland that I'd seen my whole life, like, it was concrete that towered above us, not mountains.
Hi and welcome to Passing Outdoors. Today I am sitting with Adam Raja. He is a climber, photographer and is also the marketing manager of Protect Our Winters. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me, mate.
No. Yeah, it's been a while coming, hasn't it?
It's been a wee while.
And we're being very social today. Also, we've got a bit of a live audience as well, so we hear some laughter in the background.
My entourage is
Your
here.
entourage is here. So, and he will participate later on, and we'll get him in for a chat too. But we've known each other about a year now, I reckon. We figured out earlier as we were sat eating pizza and drinking beer. But it's been, I don't know, have we got to know each other pretty well? I think, and I think you're more kind of out there now, if you know what I mean. We'll talk about your most recent exploits, but we've tied up at a few different events and had a few beers, etc., and had a few chats. So I suppose it's take it right back. Where did your path begin? Where did your journey begin?
Oh man, like outdoors related?
Well, I think we've talked about this in the past, and probably just taking it back to the youth, I feel like, and your experience when you were younger, because I think it was later on you kind of got into the outdoors. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so like I never stepped foot in like the outdoors as I know it today, like the hills in Scotland until I was like, I don't know, I need to do my homework, but like 20s, I was in my 20s anyway, do you know what I mean, like mid-20s. And before that, so grew up Cumbernauld, about 10 minutes from Glasgow. It's basically Glasgow, we've got a G in our postcode.
Well, yeah, for anybody who isn't from Glasgow, I suppose Cumbernauld would fall into the but when you for Glaswegians, for anybody, Cumbernauld a little bit out.
Anyone from Cumbernauld, it's always I just live just outside Glasgow. But yeah, grew up there. Kind of grew up in the 90s into noughties. And yeah, I don't know, I had an interesting experience, childhood growing up in Cumbernauld.
Are you? Can you share that with us?
Grew up a mixed race family. So my dad's from Pakistan, and he was probably like one of the first Pakistani immigrants that lived in Cumbernauld. Opened up a takeaway restaurant. I think he had hell actually getting that because it was like the first one that opened in Cumbernauld. And my mum's from Scotland. She's from Glasgow, and they broke up when I was at quite a young age. So he was around. My father was around, but he wasn't really in my life, and he was an alcoholic, so wasn't a great influence when he was, or role model. So yeah, single parent home, and you know, when you grow up in a single parent home, money's obviously tighter. Like by all means, my mum did everything she could. Like she worked around the clock. We never did without. She put food on the table, put clothes on our backs, but she worked hard to do that.
So there was never really an opportunity for, and this is only from my experience, from a similar experience, that never really an opportunity to do anything extra, and the outdoors would be extra potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, just culturally, like she comes from a working class family, and like inner city Glasgow, like they moved from Blackhill, which is like one of the kind of notorious housing schemes in Scotland, Glasgow. So it just wasn't something they had prior experience to. So even if we had like the money and the time to do that, it wasn't something that we would have thought about doing in the first place. Like her father wasn't like out parading about the hills. So, and she did do stuff with me though, that was the thing. I see when I dwell back on it now, like I feel she did everything she could. Like she did work late, but when she would come home, like whatever sport or whatever thing I was interested in that week, I went from like baseball to basketball. Like she would go out and throw baseballs with me in the park. Do you know what I mean? For half an hour if she could after work, or on the weekend when she had time, like in between, like going shopping with my gran and stuff. So yeah, like regardless of like the difficulties or whatever I presented, like she always did her all, and I always feel really conscious or self-conscious when I'm talking about it, because I never want to paint her in a bad light, because despite having difficulties and facing difficult situations from her being a single parent and the things that come with that, still did do her all. And by all means, despite any challenges, I still had a good childhood in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so being from that area of Glasgow, outskirts of Glasgow, you're obviously at school. Like, was there any kind of challenges there for you being mixed race? And I know you're quite open in talking about it, so that's why I bring it up. But
Yeah, it was probably from primary school. I was always aware of race, and I was aware of being different. Like, I didn't know what it was, didn't know what it meant really. I just knew I was different because I was classified as something else. Like, probably, I was actually working this out a few weeks ago, but it was like first experience I remember was probably primary three, primary four, primary three, I think, because my sister was 4 years older than me, and she was in first year, and it was a boy who went to school with her, or was in her year, sorry, and I was walking home from school or out playing with my friend, and we were like going under an underpass, and he was under there, and he was drunk, and he just grabbed me, and he punched me in the face. He was like, "You and your sister are fucking packies." And that's the first time I remember being like called that word, but I always remember it. Like, I just always knew that I was, or at least classified as, a Paki in Commonwealth. Which was weird. It was troubling for me in the sense that my mum was white, my grandparents were white, they're Scottish. I didn't know anything other than that. I liked square sausage, I liked Iron Bread, you know what I mean? And I didn't know
so as Scottish,
Pakistan,
yes.
yeah, I'd never been there. And my father, who was Pakistani, it didn't have much of an influence in my life. Like, I didn't learn about that culture. And I didn't know any of my family from Pakistan. So by all means, I was Scotland, but my brown skin and my second name meant that I was a Paki.
And at the time then, how did you kind of cope with that? How did you, or did it trouble you at the time?
Yeah, like, it upset me at the time. Yeah. It was difficult. I didn't understand it, to be honest. Like,
and was your sister able to help with that, or did she have similar experiences? Or
yeah, like, so we never spoke about it at the time. Like, it wasn't something I spoke to anyone about at the time. Now that I've spoken to her as adults, like, she had similar experiences, but at the time, nah, like, it was just kept to yourself. So, like, after that incident with that guy, his name is Martin.
You're outed, Martin. We'll find you.
After Martin punched me, like, I cried, whatever, and went home, but like, just wiped my face, went and sat at my Gran's house and watched cartoons, and that was sort of the behaviour. That was what I did after that. It was stay at home, watch cartoons, play the PlayStation, don't expose yourself to those situations. So yeah, I guess I became quite reclusive. And I think by nature, like, my mum's really shy and quite quiet as well, so I had that nature anyway, but that kind of heightened it. So I just didn't like going out. If people would like tap the door for me, I'd be like, tell them I'm out playing. Tell them I'm like not here, I'm doing something, I'm sleeping. So just rather than
to expose yourself out there, and have somebody on sort of isolate you, essentially.
Yeah, and it was more, do you know what I mean? We're creatures of comfort. Yeah, we like it. So just to put myself in those situations, I didn't want to do that. And if you can sit in front of cartoons and eat a bowl of cereal, like, I was quite happy. That was
easier.
Yeah. So that works for when you're at a younger age, especially. Like, that's fine. And
so as you got older, sort of through primary school, did that change at all? Or obviously, sort of primary 3 would be what, 7, 8 years old?
Yeah.
Maybe a wee bit younger.
Yeah, probably about that, yeah. It didn't change in primary school. I was like that right through to high school. And I think things probably changed when I was maybe like 13, 14. Puberty started to set in, kind of all that cereal I was eating. all that extra calcium like grew. Because even from like 30, I was like nearly 6 foot suddenly. put on weight as well, and just the culture that I was around. Like I think I started to realise hiding wasn't making things easier for me. Like whether maybe I was hiding after school, but I still had to go into school every day and face people every day that weren't nice to me. And going home and hiding after school wasn't taking that away. And unfortunately, like I knew, or Cumbernauld and Glasgow as a whole, there was a lot of gang culture. There's a lot of postcode gangs at the time, or young teams. You'll be aware. And culturally, I mean, that was they, to an extent, were the kids that were cool. They were who we respected. They were who we feared. They were the kids you kind of wanted to be, generally. And I mean, for other reasons as well, but just not, I guess, having that. Like my mum worked a lot, so I was kind of free to roam after school. Like I had the keys for the house. I would walk home from school and then kind of do whatever I wanted to do. So I started to kind of, I guess, lean into my fears to an extent, because I was like, if I can't run away from these people, how do I get them to respect me? How do I become one of them? And it was just sort of through a friend that I started hanging around with the local young teams, the gangs. Okay. And I mean, you didn't know you were doing it at the time, it was just your mates. But it certainly changed things. And I think at the time I thought, okay, if these kids can like me, it'll make my life a bit easier if I get in with a gang. Yeah,
you got a bit of support, possibly.
And even just like, because these were the kids like people were scared of, do you know what I mean? Or they had the reputation like, oh, don't mess with him. So I was like, I want people to say that about me. I didn't want to be picked on anymore. But I think maybe within school, for example, it may have made my life easier because they're like, oh, he hangs around with such and such, he does this. But I think at the same time, outside of school, I exposed myself to more difficult situations and people whose morals were probably at a lower standard than the
so you were potentially taking one problem away and or hiding one problem and creating another one. So the group that you were kind of getting in with, did they, and I don't really want to use the word accept, but accept your colour, let's say?
Nah, I don't.
Were you still kind of, you're still that guy?
Yeah, I was like that. I was still called that, and probably more than I had been previously, to be honest. Like,
so did you become kind of numb to it then?
You know, I don't know. I hated it. It just felt like, I don't think I became numb to it because it hurts to this day in a way. Like it's funny. Like it's something I hadn't realised. But whenever I was speaking about race, so I would never have admitted being Pakistani or like spoke about that up until like 2 years ago. Just even though I've not got a problem with it, it was just ingrained in me. Like that's a dirty word. And whenever I used to speak about race, I would, if someone asked me where I was from or where my family was from, I would say anything before I said Pakistan. Anything I could pass for, like Egyptian, Moroccan, like anything that I would be like, oh, I can pass for that. Okay, I'll say that because it's not Pakistani. Because that was just like, at least in that culture, it was like the lowest tier that you could be, at least in their eyes. So I didn't become numb to it, but yeah. It was more frequent, but the difference was, okay, maybe I had that violent experience with Martin, but not all racism is that, what's the word?
Aggressive? Confrontational?
Yeah, some of it's kind of subliminal, but there was more experiences like that as a teenager, especially in the gangs, and I had difficulty because my mum was in one area and my dad lived in another area, and it was in the area that my dad lived in that a lot of my friends were from, but because I lived with my mum during the week, I wasn't from that postcode, that area, so they'd already hated me for that reason as well. So like I couldn't win.
Double conflict.
Yeah. It was difficult. So I was an outsider, like double fold.
An outsider in Cumbernauld.
And the experiences were, yeah, like they were violent.
I was going to say that. I was going to ask that. What did you get up to? Was it fighting, just gang fighting, or?
I mean, I was a proper shite bag. Like, I maybe liked the idea of the things that came with the gang, the reputation, but I was not a fighter. Like, I didn't like fighting. If I did fight, it took a lot for me to be able to do it, and I hadn't even fought.
And did you feel you had to kind of be involved in it because you wanted to be part of the gang that protected you a little bit?
Yeah, you weren't part of them unless you were fighting with them. But I'd actually thought, because I was trying to think, I was like, I've been speaking like with Matt Pycroft and stuff about this recently, so, and I was like thinking back, I was like, what were the experiences, what were the first experiences? I was like, have I been over dramatising this? And like I was thinking back, I was like, oh no, it was pretty bad. And like just one of the things I remember was, I think like 13, so I was at my wee mate Rambo's house, he lived next to my dad, and we were in his house after school. We were just playing PlayStation, listening to music, and then there was like a park that we would all kind of meet at after school, because we all went to different schools. And we're on the way so me, in fact, and another friend, Brian. So Brian was another guy that lived next to Rambo, and we're walking down to Brian's house because he lives next to the park, and we're going to see people there. And as we're walking towards it, we walk past a shop. And as we cross the shop, a group of guys come out, and straight away, like without saying anything, there's three of them, a hammer gets pulled out, a knife, and like 2 bottles. And I hadn't even been in a fight at this point. I had no idea what's happening.
So this was the start of your gang?
This was at least one of the first experiences I remember, and I was just like, what is happening here? And they come up to Brian, so I didn't realise at the time, so Brian was actually from Glasgow originally and had moved to this area, so they didn't like him because of that. And I knew these guys. One of them was Rambo's cousin, one of them was a guy I'd like hung out with like days prior, and we just kind of look at each other and we're like, shit, and we like split. So Brian runs one way, the guy's chasing him with a hammer, I run the other way, and the 2 guys come after me. And I was still quite like heavy at this point, because all that, again, eating all that cereal, and I was overweight until I was like 16. But try to run, get to an alleyway. It was like an underpass with like stairs from an alleyway, and I was just like done, exhausted, and just like turned around. I was like I don't have a problem, I don't know what it is, but I just a bottle hit over my head and punched. And Rambo was like just stood there watching, but as I say, I kind of, in hindsight, that seems harsh, but it was his cousins. I don't know.
It's probably conflicted in terms of what he could do. Yeah.
And they left me, like maybe kicked me a few times. I'm down, kind of got up, and they walked away, and Rambo got me up, and after that, so I ended up in hospital. So I went back to my mum, kind of tail in between my legs, feeling sorry for myself, like covered in blood, trying to think what I'm going to say to my mum. But as I'm doing that, Brian goes back to his house. Brian got a baseball bat and he retaliated. And Brian found 2 of them, or 2 of the guys that were in that crowd. One of them ended up in hospital, like life-changing injuries. The guy couldn't smell to this day, like brain damage. And the other guy, as I was sitting in A&E with my mum, that guy was sitting in front of me in A&E with his dad, with a broken arm. And that was like 13, and like at the time, I don't know, I didn't think of it as that bad, but in hindsight, it was we became like used to seeing that kind of thing fairly quick.
So
in hindsight, it's very fortunate I can look at that and be like, that's messed up, I shouldn't have been seeing that, but like that kind of stuff became the norm. And like that was the last time I saw Brian. Like I spoke to Brian after that on like Facebook and stuff, but he was on the run from the police after that. Like he was older than us, he was like 16 years old, but like he went to prison after that, and I've like not seen him since.
So the lifestyle has obviously been permanent for him.
Yeah, and he was a nice guy. See, by all means, I never had a problem with Brian. Nice guy, but obviously that's the kind of thing.
That decision that he made that day has
set him on a path. I can never justify his actions, but that was the kind of thing that was accepted, I guess.
So how long did that kind of lifestyle last? Like when did that?
I mean, once you're in that kind of lifestyle, it's hard to get out. Like, and the more entrenched in it you are, the deeper the hole gets and the harder it is to get back out. Do you know what I mean?
And did the kind of racial side of it, was that continuous throughout as well? Was that still part of it?
I mean, yeah, that never like went away up until. I'm trying to think the last time I heard something racial. Probably until I removed myself from that environment, to be honest. Like, obviously I went to university and stuff, and that's kind of what took me out of that environment. And it was, if I went back there today, I would probably still you would hear those words. But it was, yeah, I was in that lifestyle up until I was 20, like until I managed to get to uni to an extent, not necessarily the gangs, because that's very much a kind of pre-pubescent teen, or pubescent teen sort of activity, but it was until, yeah, to an extent until I was like 20 and I was exposed to that.
So,
kind of racism
so
as
through
well.
that time then, what was your, because I know you're quite close to you're very close to your gran, and obviously close to your mum. How were they with all this that was going on? Were they aware of it was happening? Obviously you were in hospital or you'd gone to hospital with your mum, but the ongoing throughout that kind of teenage years, did they know it was happening, or were you able to hide that from them, or what was the...
Like, it's a weird one because like I had a lot, like that's the thing, my mum, she was working all the time, so I was able to hide a lot of it. I think there were definitely red flags. I think there were maybe some things that she turned a blind eye to because I lied about them. And for the most part, like, the things that put me in hospital, like that, things like that happened probably 5 occasions I could probably remember having to go to hospital, and they generally were like random encounters, so I didn't have to lie to an extent, but I would make it sound better than it was in a way to her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
Was
was your sister aware of it because she was of the kind of similar age?
She became aware when we get older, and that became like a point of contention between us because she would kind of try and out me to an extent, or I don't know, try and win my mum's favour by making me look bad. Because she was, in my mum's eyes, she was a rebellious one. Like, she was a bad one. Because she was the one that was at home and like arguing with my mum because she wanted to sneak out for like a drink on a Friday. Whereas I was like a mummy's boy. Like, despite everything that was going on outside the house, I was like, yes, mum, no, mum, you want me to wash the dishes, mum? I'll do it. I'll kick that out of you, mum. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, like it was definitely a point of contention between my sister. Because she was the one that kind of gave my mum that at least immediate grief and trouble. I was bringing myself trouble for the most part. But like, things escalate, and you know, there's only so much lying, or there's only so much fairy tales you can tell when the police are at the door, for example, and they're telling your mum what you've done. And like, you've just got to hold your hands up at that point.
Yeah. So I suppose educationally at school, then you talk about going to uni, so you must have done reasonably well at school educationally to be able to progress to that.
Yeah, like, I didn't apply myself at school. I never liked school.
I was brainy.
I was laughing because, you know, I always said, when everyone asked me, I'm like, the only reason I had enough hires to go to university was because I was too scared to drop it. I was too scared of my gran to drop out of school.
Yeah,
she'd always be like, I'll kill you if you drop out of school. So I stayed on at school. And that's like, again, that's where the nuance comes in, like, because I think about it, I'm like, why have I been able to remove myself successfully from that life and do well and make a normal life for myself when my peers like Brian didn't? And I mean, some of it's just luck and serendipity, like, but at the same time, it was things like that, like, I was scared of my gran, but I had that support in an extent. She wanted me to do well, and I did stick in at school, so that when I did want to turn my life around, I had that education to fall back on. So yeah, I was really fortunate, and that was probably the most important thing in turning your life around, because I didn't have many options, but at least education gave me that kind of chance.
Yeah, that kind of way out. to sort of better yourself and get out of the situation of the gangs.
Yeah, that's it.
Because it could be, like you've mentioned, it could have been a downward spiral instead of the upward spiral that you've managed to get yourself on.
I mean, and it was, mate, and it was like it for a long time. Like things got worse before they got better, and yeah, I don't know. It didn't like I didn't. There were points where I resigned myself to it, like where I didn't like I just thought that this was life now at this point, and I think that's horrible to look back on because I'm so thankful for whatever reason that I did turn things around and have that sort of eye-opening experience or like that catalyst to change, because I know a lot of people that never did.
So, I mean, I know from my experience that even just staying on at school from the gangs, etc., you would get a bit of jip for that, did you? Or was there any...
Mate, I was the only, like I didn't have any friends when I was in 5th and 6th year because all my mates had dropped out. And then like, yeah, you would get made fun of for still being at school. That was something, again, that I hadn't thought about before it came up recently, but it was like you got, culturally, the negatives were reinforced. So you were less respected for staying on at school. You were less respected for not drinking alcohol. You were less respected for not being involved in the gangs. And the more that you leaned into that stuff, or the more you were involved, or the worse your reputation was, the more culturally that you were accepted. So the more trouble that I got in, the more, I mean, like I said, I never was completely accepted, but the more I felt accepted, and the easier my life got.
And then when you stayed on, you were less accepted?
I mean, to an extent, it wasn't a huge issue, but I probably kept it myself.
Yeah, kept it out of the way. So when you did move, went through 5th and 6th year and then went to higher education, did you see a big change then?
So yeah, there was a big break because after high school, I didn't immediately see options, and I guess the life I was living at the time, I don't know, presented a lot of barriers, and yeah, I ended up, after high school, I ended up going to Youth Offenders Institute, so it wasn't straight to university.
So what took you there?
So, I guess in a way, it was the exposure to the gangs and that lifestyle and that culture, but it wasn't the gangs themselves, because at a young age I realised that wasn't making my life easier, like it was just causing more trouble. And I wasn't a fighter, I didn't like fighting. But what it did expose you to was the other sides of that culture, which was drug dealers and other forms of criminals and gangsters. And so yeah, at like kind of 14, I ended up, I mean, I don't like using this word, but I guess it's what you were in hindsight, like kind of groomed by older drug dealers to sell drugs for them. So at like 14 years old, yeah, I ended up selling drugs.
Yeah, it's uneasy in that lifestyle, and I'm kind of aware of it from my growing up. Fortunately for me, I was never involved in it, but I'm aware that, I mean, that's an easy avenue to go down, especially if you're being pressured by people who are there that you feel will protect you.
It's like today, with the lens I've got today, it's hard to talk about it because I know how it's viewed in larger society. But again, within that culture and where we were growing up, it wasn't viewed that way. Like, drugs were perceived the same way, I guess, like alcohol is perceived. Most of my mates smoked weed, and it wasn't, I mean, we knew it was something that was bad, but it was accepted. And again, in the same way that being affiliated to a gang kind of brought that respect, it was the same with the drugs. And it was like cannabis, and yeah, and it was, I think it was a friend's big brother, and it was just a guy that you looked up to, and that was something that always stuck out to me. Like my role models and our role models back then, they weren't football players, they weren't businessmen, they weren't like, our role models were drug dealers and gang members. And I think I don't ever try and justify my actions, but you aspire to be what you can see in the people you look up to, and they were who we looked up to, because they're the people that got respect. And I couldn't play football. I wasn't going to make it out of Glasgow playing football, and I didn't see myself doing it through like education. I never thought very highly of myself, and again, my peers weren't like getting out through university. I was the first person in my family to go to university, so it didn't seem necessarily like a feasible option. So it was, I don't know, it was attractive, and yeah, it was kind of portrayed to you not being a negative thing, but at that age, 14 years old, you're not thinking about how that's going to impact your life when you're 21.
And I imagine it is kind of giving you a bit of kudos within the group and in the surrounding area, that if you are part of the team, part of the people who are dealing and you are the person that's they're coming to, then you are attractive, if you like.
I guess, I mean, yeah, and I mean, it comes with its own set of new issues again. But yeah, you were part of the clique, you fitted in. And more so than that, it's like that kind of life brings a lot of trouble to your door. And when you don't open your mouth, that's what brings you the respect, when you can be seen as a trustworthy person. And so when I was like maybe 15, I think, maybe with the first time that I did get in trouble with the police for that, and I didn't tell them where I got that bit of weed, then they kind of like look past the colour of your skin.
And they give you a bit more respect. And
that's dangerous because of my prior experience, and I guess the issues and, I don't know, difficulties that I had previously, like I craved that. So for me, I definitely leaned into it, and it was addictive. Like I wanted that, and unfortunately, it was a really negative place I found that.
But like you said, it's it's down to the role models that you have in front of you. It's difficult to separate the bad from the good if the respect is lies in the people who are bad,
Yeah, and it is like it's funny because as through this lens now, like I'm so fortunate that I can look at it through this lens and see it as a negative. But back then, it wasn't. It was like it was just part of life. Like the first time I tried weed, for example, it was my friend's dad that gave us it, and then it was the first time I sold it. It was my friend's big brother that had kind of talked us into doing it. And it was like just to buy or sell, like, I don't know, a bottle of wine for the weekend. Yeah. And then I think the other side was it was an alluring prospect because I couldn't, or maybe the thing was I probably could have, but I didn't want to go to my mum and ask for things because I knew how much she was struggling or how hard she had to work just to pay the bills and pay the mortgage. So for me, it was easier to turn to these guys who could put money in my hands than it was to go to my mum and ask for money. And I feel bad saying that because I don't want her to hear that and think I'm projecting the blame onto her. But the fact is, I know if I went to her, she would have found a way. But me feeling like a man at 14, I didn't want to do that.
Especially not got a father figure in the house constantly. Obviously, you're still talking to your dad, but not having him there as a constant role model and support.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. You never know because you don't know how that would have changed things. I think obviously having a positive role model, I think it would have helped. Like you see the stats for kids that haven't had fathers at home and they're not great. But like I always said that my Gran and Gran, they were like my father. To an extent, they fulfilled that role. Like my gran would pick me up from school when I was a toddler and from nursery. But yeah, I think I'd always, even to this day, I think I probably have it somewhat, like I've always craved that sort of, I guess, a father figure, and that's sort of, again, what kind of pushed me towards these older gangsters, drug dealers, because they offered that as well. Like, again, these guys may be perceived negatively and they may have got me in trouble, but at the time they offered me something I needed. So it's funny to dwell back on it.
So what ultimately happened then?
So maybe, yeah. I mean, when you initially get involved in that lifestyle, even if it's an option initially, it very quickly doesn't become a choice, rather. Because as soon as you're in, people don't want to let you go. They want to give you bigger amounts of things, and they expect money from you, money that you've not necessarily got, but you owe them, because you're not paying for this in cash. And yeah, I guess things just spiral and snowball to an extent, and more people become involved and things become more serious. And ultimately it led to, I got arrested and I got caught with, I had a small amount of cocaine on me, and I had a larger amount at my mum's house. And when I was caught with the amount on my person, they went to my mum's house. So my mum's house was raided by CID, and they found it, and I was sentenced. Got sentenced to 3 years in youth offenders, and I served 1 year.
I can't even imagine what that's like. How old were you then when you were sentenced?
It's weird talk. I hate talking about it actually. So I don't hate talking about it, but it's hard to say. Do you know what I mean?
I bet I couldn't even imagine.
Especially when you talk about the detail. It's funny because like Oz is here, and Oz is sick of hearing my patter. As soon as me and Oz are going up the hills on the weekend, I'll jump in the car and I'll be like, right mate, and I'll just chat about anything. But it's different when you're putting it out to a larger audience, because I know Oz won't judge me. I know Oz understands.
I'd like to hope that the majority won't judge you, because they're past mistakes, and you are sitting here now, and obviously we'll go on to what you've done since, but I would like to think people are good. I like to think that. I know there's some bad, and we can talk about that another time, maybe off air, but as I said before we started recording, we'll only put out and record what you're happy to talk about, and if you're not happy to talk about it, then that's fine. I don't have a problem.
Oh, good. No, it's just funny when you say it out loud. 'Cause it's something I've held in or like ran away from for a long time, or tried to distance myself from. But no, sorry. What was the question?
So how old were you when that sentencing came?
So it kind of dragged out. So I was 17 or 18, but it get like delayed basically, like because I got bailed, and then it wasn't until I was 18, turned 19, I think, that I actually got sentenced for it. So and that was difficult, because you were living with that hanging over you, and at that point it was more than a year that that was the point where I gave up and I'd resigned myself to it, because I knew there was nothing for me at the end of this tunnel. I knew where I was going, and nothing I could do could change that or take me out of those circumstances, so why try and do better?
So that must have been after thinking about ages there, that you must have done kind of finished high school, but then you'd done 15, 16 years.
So that jumped. Yeah. So
No, I'm just kind of looking at the time. So you'd obviously worked hard through, did the full 6 years.
Yeah.
And this was going on at the time,
Mm-hmm.
was it? Was it still ongoing at the time? And then this happened kind of after high school finished?
Yeah, so like I said, but after high school, I was wrapped up in that lifestyle, and you can't just walk away from it. Like, you can't. So it continued probably like a year after high school until I ended up going to youth offenders.
I think the fact for me, and I hope anybody else listening or watching, the fact that you've been doing that and you came out of high school with an education is pretty impressive. Because from my, not in a kind of fucking good effort type way, because from my experience, people who were into that were not staying on for 5th and 6th year, and obviously in your experience, because people were obviously doing the same thing but not staying on at high school.
Yeah, I was just scared of my granny.
Fair enough.
I mean, so
I think we all are.
It was never the lifestyle I wanted, ultimately. I think I was always hopeful and I always wanted, like I always wanted to apply myself to things. I never wanted to turn up at school and be perceived as bad or stupid or whatever. And I always wanted to apply myself, and I enjoyed certain aspects of school, well, certain classes and certain subjects. But yeah, I don't know. And as well as that, it was a hidden life. Like my mum didn't know what was going on outside the house, outside of the classroom.
So you're living a kind of double life, really.
Yeah, and isn't it funny? It's kind of funny. It's funny to look back on, because like some mornings my mum would drop me off at school. Some mornings I would walk, some mornings she would drop me off if it was the same time, and she would drop me off at school, and I'd like watch her drive off, and then I'd just walk home. Like I would go into school. I don't know how I got my attendance so low and how it was not picked up on, but that, like, I was probably attending like 2-3 days a week, some weeks, like for prolonged periods. And then like days you did walk to school, I would just walk and wait till she had left, and then come back. And actually one day, so I came home from school and she would come home for lunch sometimes. I was just like messing about in the house. Actually, do you know what I was doing? It was like I'd walked home from school and I got soaked because it was like snowing. Came home, took my school uniform off, I was sitting in my boxers, and I was eating a bowl of Cocoa Pops, watching cartoons. And I heard a car pull up to the drive, and there was like a picture on the wall, and I could see our car in the reflection. I was like, shit. So I just like turned off the TV, grabbed my like school uniform off the floor, and ran out the house and ran out the back door and into our garage. We had like a garage on the house, and I like hid in there, and I was sitting like waiting, listening for her quiet. Like I could hear her using the microwave, could hear her like making a cup of tea and stuff, and then she went back out. I was like, phew. So like I went to creep back in, I looked to put my clothes in, I only had my shirt, I'd left my trousers, so I don't know how she didn't see them. And I went in, pushed the back door, and she'd locked it. I bet I was locked outside till my sister came home at like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, sitting in the garage in my boxers and shirt, freezing.
Hypothermic.
So that was the kind of funny side of that double life, I guess. But yeah, and even stuff like that, like she just didn't know what I was doing.
And like you said earlier, it's not. She obviously tries her best and was doing her best to keep you and your sister. So it's no reflection on her, and it's I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's like she wants the best for you, and you're trying your best, but also you've got this double life that you got pressures from elsewhere.
And that's it. And like a mother wants to believe their son. Like if you tell your mother something, even if she doesn't necessarily trust to believe what you're saying, they want to believe it, and they want to see the good in you, even when they're seeing something bad or thinking something negative. And just, yeah, it was that I did feel like it feels stupid in hindsight now, because when I look back on it, I was a kid, and I feel like I was a kid until I was like 21 probably, maybe older. But I felt like I was a man at that point, and I felt like I had to make a keep for myself and do my own thing and live my own life. You just had to stay with your mum when you were at that age as well, and do what they told you when you're in there. But so yeah, there was a lot of conflict in that sense.
I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but just in terms of how it affected you and the people around you. So you got sentenced when you were 19, roughly? Thereabouts. Yeah. How does that affect the people around you? Namely, probably your mum and your gran, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's devastating. Like, it probably impacted them more, or at least as much as it impacts the individual. Like, my mum is completely sheltered from that life, like regardless of her coming from like council estates and like rough parts of Glasgow. Like, she she was very sheltered from that. Even like the alcoholism, so she has a glass of wine. She doesn't drive for like 2 days, and she's never like smoked, and she's just a very proper woman, and she's just very kind and doesn't have any exposure to those sort of negative things that I was involved in. So I think it was devastating for her to realise that was going on under her nose, essentially, in her house by her son, who she's raised. And then, as well as that, I think the not knowing, but the embarrassment as well. Like, she had to read the papers, people she worked with read papers and hear about it. And again, wanting the best for your son, and you've got to watch your son get taken away, and there's nothing that she could have done to help me. And I remember like after I went to court, I was very fortunate, and I got bailed out, and I went home, and I couldn't face her, so I went to my friend's house. We kind of had a few beers and stuff, and we're talking about it and whatever. And when I did go home, I was like a wee bit drunk, and it just all sank in, and I was going to creep into my room, and I stopped. Then I just kind of opened her door, and I was like, "You awake?" She was like, "Yeah." She went, "I fucked up, haven't I?" And I just burst out crying. And she was just like, "Yeah." And I could just hear it in her voice, like she knew at that point as well, like there's nothing either of us could have done, it was all done by that point. So I think that was especially hard on her, because you want to help your son, you want to help your kids, you want to help your family, and in that situation it's beyond that point.
And then when you did finally get sentenced and you went away, how does the support network run then? Was your family, I don't want to say supportive of you being in there, but like did they help while you were in there? What about all the other gang members? What happened to them?
I mean, yeah, that's like the majority of people forget about you, I think. It's weird actually, because you get letters from people that you've spoke to once, and then you don't get letters from the people that you really want to on occasions as well, or visits. So I don't know, there's that sort of clout, or that, again, people that had been to prison or people that were certified as being involved in that lifestyle were respected, and people wanted to be associated with them. So you would get like letters from younger, other people's like younger brothers and stuff that kind of wanted to have that sort of clout of being associated with you. But then the people that you were heavily involved in, or the people that you thought were your friends, like they don't remember you, don't care that you're in there, they don't help out, don't send you letters. So that was difficult, and I think that was one of the most difficult things about it, because your life's indefinitely paused and nothing's changing for you, and they're out there getting on with it. And maybe fair enough, because you've made the decisions that you have, but it's hard. But my family, again, were great and super supportive. My mum wrote to me all the time. You get called and visits, and that was probably one of the things that ended up being the catalyst, was visits from my family. Because in one of my visits, my nephew at the time, my oldest nephew, but it was my only nephew at the time, visited, and he was young enough that he didn't understand where he was. So we told him it was my work, and he was small, like a toddler, so he believed that. And it broke my heart, like seeing him in there. And I always seen so much of myself in him. And he was literally growing up in the same house I grew up in, the same area, in the same bedroom, like he was in my bedroom. And I was like, and his father as well wasn't around. I was like, this isn't the role model. I need to be a role model for him. I can't be this. And yeah, so that was probably the first moment that I remember being like, right, that's it. When you get out here,
has to change and going forward.
But yeah, they were great. Like they stuck by me, and I think that makes a difference. Other people having faith in you as well, because yeah.
So what was the first thing that you did when you got out?
KFC.
The live studio audience says KFC. Is that right?
It literally was
Yeah.
KFC, yeah. I can't remember why, I was just craving a KFC. Mate, it was like 10 in the morning. And it was my sister that came and picked me up. Like with my bin bag and took me straight to KFC, got a bucket of chicken. And I ate like 2 pieces and was full. That was nice. So it was funny because me and my sister had always had that sort of difficult relationship, but I think in a weird way that experience brought us closer together. So we're writing each other letters and stuff, and I don't know, talking. But yeah, picked me up, took me to KFC, and then I think we went to a supermarket. No. We went to like a shopping centre because I wanted to look at like clothes and stuff, and I don't know, it was just weird being outside. And that was weird because I wasn't in a long time, but it was horrible. The experience. See, when you went from there straight to somewhere like a shopping centre with like loads of people going by, traffic going, it was so.
I can imagine a bit of a culture shock.
It was just a stimulus as well.
Yeah.
Like, so you can only imagine how people that have been in there for like life and get out what it feels like for them. But yeah, it just felt very noisy, very busy.
And was that anxiety? Did that?
Yeah, I had a panic attack.
Did you?
I basically freaked. We were in like, I think we were in like JD Sports looking at like Nike tracksuits, and I was just like, nah, like let's get out of here, and just freaked me out. It was really weird.
Yeah, I bet. So you mentioned there about getting closer to your sister. Obviously, that was a sort of benefit of being, or a bonus, if you like, from being in that situation, or was it? Is that what you found?
I mean, I guess when you face difficult situations with people, or with people, it brings you kind of closer together. I mean, I would have liked us to have had a stronger relationship without such an extreme
yeah, it's a fairly extreme situation to go to
situation playing out, but it's good that
that came from it.
An outcome.
And looking back on it now, was there any other opportunities, let's not call them positives, because they may be positive, but was there any kind of opportunities that you took, whether it be education or kind of doing something whilst you were isolated?
I mean, one of the biggest takeaways is just the constant exposure to deprivation and rock bottom. Like, if you've got a little bit of ambition and you're being exposed to that, you want to run as far and as hard away from that as you can. And you see, it's sad to say, but I think there was points in my life where I felt hopeless and that my situation was hopeless, but when you're in there, you see real hopelessness. You see people that are completely institutionalised and that don't see anything beyond that. And I think, again, like I said, I think there were moments where I didn't, but I was still always had a bit of hope for myself and that I could turn things around. So I guess it was just that sort of, the motivation from seeing the lowest of lows that you can get. Really, it was rock bottom.
From seeing it, not directly, but from seeing it from things like television and things like that, you see people who maybe they're not coming back from that, but you obviously have come back from that, or it feels like that now anyway. How do you feel about your change in life from then to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, I'm super happy. Like, this is probably the first, because it's taken a lot to get to the point I'm at right now. And this is probably, not this very moment, but the past few years is probably the first moment or period in my life where I've actually felt happy again, or content, and that I'm not struggling just to run away from something or prove that I wasn't something. So yeah, it's good. It's nice. It's nice that I can look back, and this is probably the first period as well where I paused and looked back, because I didn't have that luxury, because I still was trying to get away from it. Like, it wasn't easy to just go to uni, and that was a culture shock. And then obviously once I'd graduated uni, applying for jobs. You've got a conviction. It's a struggle. How do you explain that? And it was difficult, and up until that was spent, which it is now, it was, even though you may have served the time for the crime, I felt like I was still paying the price for a decade after. It doesn't just go away. So it's been continuous. So now it's probably the first moment or period in my life where I'm able to pause and look back and go, okay, look how far you've come. Because I've always just tried to get away from that. It was like doing it, like when I was at uni, it wasn't just going to uni. I was doing everything I could, because I couldn't, when I came out, I couldn't get a job. I was applying for jobs at McDonald's, KFC, funnily enough, Burger King, and I couldn't get a job. Nobody wanted to hire me.
Because of your background?
Because
of
and I had
the conviction?
Yeah, and I was released with a tag as well, so there was like a curfew. So university, I like milked that for everything I could. Like when I got into university, again, it wasn't straightforward. Like I had to disclose to them, and I had to do a summer school because I'd like never went to maths class because that was one of the many periods where I was like at home eating cereal instead of like sitting doing maths in my boxers, and I didn't have that. So it was business I went on to study, so I had to do like a summer school to prove that I could do maths, and then I couldn't get a job, so I ended up looking at opportunities in the university, and they did something called student mentoring, where you worked with like kids from deprived areas, and went to schools and kind of talked to them about university and the options and how they got there. And I applied for that, and I fortunately got that, and that opened up a lot of doors for me because it gave me experience on my CV. Do you know what I mean? And they gave me an opportunity. So I just had to take every opportunity that presented itself, over a long period of time. Do you know what I mean? A decade of doing that through university, and then beyond that, taking jobs that I didn't necessarily want to do, or that I didn't enjoy.
And when you come out and you were looking at getting in university, how your old lifestyle, did that call you in any way, or did the individuals out there, did they try and pull you back into it?
Yeah, it's hard because there comes that point, because when I first went to university, that's all I knew. Those people were in my life. That was my friends. All my friends were involved in that life. I didn't have friends that were outside of that kind of lifestyle. And when I first went to university, I had nothing in common with the people there. I didn't know anyone there for a start. There were maybe a couple years, most of them, like obviously there's mature students as well, but most of them were a couple years younger. And so it was really difficult. So it was difficult, and I gravitated towards obviously the people that I knew in the same places, and I was still living where I grew up. Like I was still in Cumbernauld and still exposed to the same people. So it was difficult, and then it came the point where I had to just completely sever those ties, because you can't live with one foot in that lifestyle. Because I was watching people, like I may have removed myself from that, but my friends were still going to prison, my friends were still doing stupid shit, and living lives that not only put themselves in danger, but would put me in danger if I was around them, by gangs, criminals, or police. So yeah, it just came to the point that I had to completely cut them off, which was difficult, because there's a lot of people, I mean, I don't not like these people. I liked them. I loved some of them. They were my friends and family, to an extent. So it was difficult, but I wasn't going to escape, I don't think, until I did completely cut them off.
Yeah, disassociate yourself with them.
And the only way I actually managed to eventually do that was, I think it was in second or third year, where I had the opportunity to do a year abroad through Erasmus, and I just, first place that would take me, I just did it because it meant I could completely disconnect myself from it and prove to myself, I think, to an extent, that you could do this, you could be someone else, you could reinvent yourself. So that was pretty.
So where did you end up?
France.
Yeah?
Yeah, went to France. Don't speak any French. Never spoke French before. Then came home speaking Spanish.
Spanish?
It was so good though. Like I loved it. Yeah, but I lived with like loads of Mexican and Argentinian and Spanish students. And it was great, but like that was amazing. That experience, see, just being exposed to different cultures and people that didn't know you for the reputation that you had or for the things that you'd done. You could be who you wanted to be, and it was the first period where I think I was myself, which was strange, but hugely empowering for when I came back home. You know, I could be myself, and I was myself, and these people liked me for who I was.
Yeah. I suppose I was going to say you would reinventing yourself, but I suppose you're just maybe re-establishing is probably.
Yeah, probably. And I think I've said it to Oz. I was like, it wasn't that I necessarily changed or became a bad person, but I played a character so long that you eventually sort of just became that, and that became the default. And it was like just from like acting tough even when you're scared, or acting like an asshole when you're really a sensitive guy, just to the point where, okay, that's a default behaviour now. And it just took a while to break that back down and just touch base with the person like I really was beneath that facade, which was nice. It was nice to be able to do that, but it was hard as well, because that facade, in a way, although it was really bad and got me in a bad place, it protected me a lot, and it let me rise above the struggles that I was facing at a younger age. So it was hard to let go of it, to be honest.
So when you came back from the trip to France speaking Spanish, what did that change then how you were when you were back in Glasgow, or did that?
Yeah, my accent. It's like, even this is a toned down Glaswegian accent.
Yes, we were talking about it. Yeah.
But that was probably the first period where I was speaking English. All the students probably spoke better English than I did. Like they all were multilingual, and you're saying something, and they're just like, what? And so I just had to like dumb down the accent. And that was funny, because I never realised it happened or noticed it happening. But like the first like catch up I had with my friends, I was like, why the fuck are you talking like that? I remember my wee mate Brian just being like, why are you talking? That's a Glasgow uni accent.
You're posh now, you've changed. Yeah.
But beyond that, just your outlook. It's such a cliche and it's kind of cheesy, but university and travel and the things like that, but it broadens your horizons. Like, I saw a world and countries and cultures that I wasn't aware of before, and I enjoyed things. I was drinking red wine, I would eat cheese and these sort of things. And yeah, just that, it broadens you, and you're open to new things that you maybe, like when I was talking about my mum and the outdoors, it wasn't something you'd considered before, but that's probably to an extent kind of what led me to see that as an opportunity, because you're open to new experiences. So yeah, it definitely made me more open-minded. And
so it's probably a nice segue into, how did you find the outdoors then? What was the catalyst for
that? I mean, the catalyst was actually, I can't remember if it was Instagram or Facebook, but it was social media. I think it was Instagram. And I didn't know there was mountains in Scotland. At least I don't think to any important degree where I dwelled on it. And I just remember seeing photographs of like Glencoe and the Buccal and being like, where's that? Like it said Scotland. I'm like, I don't believe that. I didn't believe that it was in Scotland. I was like, is this Iceland or something? And I wanted to see it, and it was kind of at the end of university when I had a bit of disposable income from student mentoring, and I'd bought a car, and the first trip I did when I got the car was drive to Glencoe, because I wanted to see if the Buccal was real. So I just like, I think it was like the day after I got my car. I think I got my car on like a Friday. It was a Saturday. Googled like the location. I think I just put Glencoe in, jumped in the car with my packed lunch, and just drove to the Highlands. And see, as soon as I got to, is it like Tindrum that you get to before you go to Glencoe? And see, as soon as I was there, because it was kind of, I think it was autumn or winter or spring, and they were all like snow capped, and they're big peaks, they're big domes there, and I was just like, what the fuck? Yeah. And I couldn't believe it. Like my job was in my lap, and I'm like driving, looking out the window and swerving across the road, and just following the sat nav towards like Glencoe. And as you get closer, and you're sort of at that point, we're approaching the Buccal, and it's just that big pyramid. And it was so daunting. It was like the black rock at the bottom, the snow at the top, and I just couldn't believe it. And I was like, I had, like butterflies seeing it. And it just improves as you're getting closer. So I just drove towards it, and like I eventually just pulled in at a lay-by and just sat and ate my lunch and just looked at it. And the first thought I had in my head at that point was, I need to climb that. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if it was, in my head it was like hill walking. I didn't know the difference, but I was like, I need to climb that. And so I sat and looked at it some more, like walked around, took some pictures. And I think when I get back to the car, like Googled, like how do you climb the Buccal? It took me like a Walk Highlands page. And so like I ordered a pair of Caramore boots again, I think, before I get the cheapest boots I could find.
I think we all had that access kit, didn't we? We all got the kit that got us on the hill, that maybe wasn't the best, but got us there.
Yeah, that served its purpose. And then just went home, and that experience, I think, the sheer juxtaposition to the Scotland that I knew and the Scotland that I'd seen my whole life, like it was concrete that towered above us, not mountains. And so the idea that was a less than 2 hour drive from me, like just blew my mind, and it captured my imagination. So like that, I want to climb that, just stuck in my head. And sort of, started the journey.
Had your photography started by then?
I think it was literally it was around about the same time actually. Because it was once I started like going out in the hills, and when I'd seen that, I was like, I need to photograph this shit. So I don't know how to use a camera. I've got this gravity phone, but I'm going to, again, I wanted to buy a camera just to photograph that stuff, so I ended up buying a camera around the same time. Just because I was seeing all these things that I couldn't believe I was seeing. And
so all sort of started at the same time?
Yeah.
And then what was the Buccal the first hill you climbed?
Oh mate, I got in trouble in the Buccal. So I think I did maybe some smaller walks, but I didn't understand the difference between like hill walking, winter walking, scrambling, climbing. It was all just up and down, and I was like looking at routes on Walk Highlands. And I think it was spring, but again, I was thinking it was spring on the ground, but up in the mountains, it's kind of those shoulder seasons. It's still we tend to get some of the best winter weather on up north, kind of in March. So it was probably around March, April. And it was like, I think it was the first big hill, and I drove to do the Buccal in my Caramore boots, a pair of like Nike Tech joggies. This jacket actually. I've had this
that very one.
No hard shell, and it's like snow capped, and I found GoPro footage. I was looking, and I deleted parts of it because I was so embarrassed. And Matt Pycroft was raging because he was like, that could have been really good for this. But there was a point where I was sitting in the car going, that looks really daunting. And I was like, but I'll go anyway. So, and I've not got like GPS OS maps on my phone, and it was like a printout of the Walk Highlands route. So I'm like looking at it, I'm like, right, put it away, and I start plodding up. So I'm walking up for ages, and it's getting steeper and steeper. And I noticed like people ahead of me, and they're like wearing helmets. They've got rope like coiled around them and stuff, and I'm like, look at these assholes, like what are these guys doing? Like, why? Bit overdressed, aren't you, mate?
I'm just gonna look at you.
and I could see them kind of looking at me, like same thoughts, bit underdressed, mate. So I kept just kind of waiting and letting them get a bit further ahead, and we're going up, and we keep going up. And I'm just kind of following the trail. I'm not looking at the map anymore, and then I'm kind of just following them somewhat. And then get to a point, and I can see that they're like ice axes out and roping up, and one's ahead leading. And I was like, right, something's wrong here. In hindsight, I didn't know, like retrospectively, but what I didn't know then was that I was actually on Curved Ridge. I wasn't on the walking route, and Curved Ridge is a grade 3 winter climb or grade 2 winter climb.
Potentially, off the top of my head.
It's a grade 3 scramble.
It's not an easy one.
So It's
Especially
certainly
with
not me
cannonball
wanting to
boots
do in a
and
pair of joggies.
yeah, and your Nike Tech joggies.
So I kind of hung around and I watched them for a bit and I was like, and at this point like a blizzard's coming in, visibility is low, I can't see the trail I took, like the path I took up, can't see the car park anymore. I was like, okay, I've made a mistake.
We've all been there.
And I backtracked, but I couldn't see anything because of the snow. And I got to like a wee water slide and I was standing on it by the time that I noticed, and it was frozen, obviously because it's like winter. And by the time I noticed, I just went skeeting. I just went and fell down it and went like, I think I fell like 10 metres. And I had it in GoPro. And see, a few years later, I found it and I was so embarrassed by my stupidity that I deleted it.
Oh.
And so I've got all the clips up to that point, and I've got the clip of me like afterwards, the GoPro footage, it's like upside down and I'm going, ugh. And
Tell me you use that in the film. Obviously, at this stage, I've not seen the film.
I sent that clip to Matt.
Right.
And fortunately, I managed to get down. I had like a sore ankle and like my tail in between my legs, kind of hobbled back to the car. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, it was winter walking buckle, and I saw like courses at Mountaineer Scotland, and I ended up booking onto that. But then I saw the bit about needing an ice axe and crampons. I was like, okay, I'll learn what they are.
So, well, just going back then, so it was just you? There was nobody else in your kind of peer group or anybody at uni or anybody from Cumbernauld that wanted to get involved in it?
No, that was the thing. Like when I cut people off, I never really re-established a circle of friends. Like I had superficial friends that you had at uni, but it wasn't the same. Like it wasn't. There was always that sort of disconnect, and I always felt a bit like the odd one out. So that was part of it. It was like I don't want to spend my weekends, or I can't spend my weekends with these people anymore. Don't really have anything in common with these people, and I don't want to spend my weekends in pubs and clubs. What am I going to do with that time? And it was like, and I just wanted to see these things, and no one else was going to take me, so I took myself.
So you got yourself on some mountaineering Scotland type courses,
yeah,
through there, and educated yourself.
Yeah, like learned about ice axe, crampons.
Did you tell them the story about going up the book?
Mountaineer Scotland?
Yeah,
I don't think so. No.
Get that one to yourself.
Yeah, get it myself. I was embarrassed.
Yeah, well, I think we've all been there. I think most mountaineers have been there. I mean, I remember being on Ben Lomond with no ice axe or crampons, standing on ice, looking down a slope, thinking
there's a bit of ice, you could be walking at my front door and there's ice is dodgy if you've not got crampons in winter. So, no, and that's the thing. Like we let pride get in the way. Sometimes you don't want to admit it. Like,
I think as males we're quite good at that. Aren't we?
Yeah, and especially like the ego. I'd sort of, but like I never wanted to admit moments of weakness, I guess, or stupidity. So I was like, I'm right. I should be here. Don't need a helmet. Don't need rope. Don't need crampons. Like, let's go.
And what do you think now? Do you need rope and crampons?
Oh mate, yeah, like, definitely. I mean, like that's the funny thing. Like, and the nice thing to look at when you look and think about progression, like curved ridge became like the goal. Like I wanted to be able to climb like curved ridge. We've still got to do it in winter actually, and we're doing it this year, which would be great to go back. But like curved ridge has become the approach route to climbing on Rannoch Wall. Like the thing that was the barrier for me at one point and the end point has now become like the gate to harder routes, which is really cool to look back and see. But it takes time and it takes a lot. You need to build up those skills and build up a lot of different skills. And I'm not the most competent, but me and Oz can go out, have a great time, keep ourselves mostly safe, and yeah, and that's just really cool. And
definitely, and it is an awesome mountain. It looks awesome, and there's so many awesome stuff. Yeah, so much.
It's anything like when I go back, I still get the same butterflies as the first time. Like I love that place, and it's got that obviously that greater meaning. But it's got to be one of the most iconic. Definitely in the UK, it's like one of the most iconic locations. But maybe globally, like it's just amazing.
I'd like to think so.
It's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. Tell you what. On that note, we're gonna have a dram.
Okay.
Yes.
Not allowed spirits.
You're not allowed spirits? I've got a problem then, because we're about to pour them.
You know what I think though?
I'll reach into that cupboard if you want. No, we're going to have a Clack Egg Glencairn glass, and I'm quite heavy-handed, so
46%. I do love whiskey. It took me a long time to enjoy whiskey because it was one of it doesn't count as whiskey, but Jack Daniels was one of the first bottles I stole out of my sister's bedroom. Probably one of the reasons we didn't get on for a long time. And I drank it straight, and it took a long time to acquire that taste.
As the same, I a few years ago decided that as a Scotsman I should be able to drink whiskey.
Yeah,
And it takes a bit of time. Fortunately, I have a good friend.
It's definitely an acquired taste.
It's got a bite to it. Slange.
Cheers, mate. It's slange.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's a nice whiskey, isn't it? I like it. Yes.
Ooh. Where's the Gavis going?
It's over there.
That.
Yeah.
Sweet.
The first one always burns. Don't worry about it. It gets easier as we go.
That is good though.
So, how then has the outdoors? A bit of a leading question, probably. But how then has the outdoors helped you?
Yeah, it's funny because that's become. There's so many of those stories where the sort of narrative is like the outdoors saved me, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing if the outdoors has saved someone, but I can't say that because like I saved me. The decisions I made when I came out of university did, but what the outdoors and those experiences did give me was so initially purpose. Like obviously, like if we lead into the career I've got today, like that came from being in those places and just enjoying it so much and the benefits that it brought my life and wanting to protect that. But then community, again, like the part of my life, that sort of void I had when I left my community behind, when I had to like sever that off, I didn't have that and I struggled to find that. So I've got my climbing mates, my climbing club, the people we climb with all the time, and that circle, and the photographers, the creatives as well. And then maybe the more important part is the identity part, because identity is something I struggled with from probably the time that guy Martin punched me in the face. Do you know what I mean? And so it was the first time, where I don't know, I just had that sort of like, I'm a climber, like I said, and it was one of the first periods of my life as well, where I was proud to be Scottish, felt Scottish, and didn't want to leave the country, because I always wanted to be somewhere else when I was younger. I didn't, obviously looking with rose-tinted glasses, being like, I'll be more accepted in other places. It's quite funny actually in hindsight, I thought I'd be more accepted in America, but I think that would not necessarily be the case. But yeah, those three things definitely, like it's definitely, and because of those three things, the quality of my life is so much better than it was. Like I may have had a university degree, I may have escaped my past to an extent, but I was still living in the shadow of it. I still felt empty. I still had that sort of void. I didn't really have mates. And that's sort of like I had a few people, but I just didn't have that community. So it's given me a better quality of life, and I've definitely just got that purpose and identity. Like I'm a climber, I'm a photographer. I do this at the weekend, every weekend. Like I love it, and it's nice feeling like you found your tribe. You know what I mean?
Passion.
Yeah, and I feel you found your people. You're comfortable.
I think you put words to it very eloquently there. You've obviously thought about it. I think you've probably had to think about it in the past few weeks because of
it's just been
different things you've been involved in. We'll touch on that in a second. But those first kind of courses and things you've gone on, how long was it before you found that community and tribe? But like, was it? Why did you follow down the path of doing the courses and going up the mountains and things?
I mean, ultimately, I didn't want to fall down another mountain.
Yeah.
This is why I went to the courses, but no, like I just wanted. So there's an addictive element to it, and it's the freedom that comes with having that range of skills. Because if all you can do is walk, you're limited on what you can do on the Berghaus, for example. So you can take the walking path, but to do curved ridge, I had to be able to scramble and have rope work and rope skills, and I wanted to experience it and to the full degree. I didn't want any limitations. Like I'd had restrictions on my life. I wanted freedom.
So you consciously thought of that? That was something that you were going through when you were thinking about it?
Yeah, to an extent, and I just didn't want barriers. I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do and see it, like all life in Scotland from these different perspectives. But it was gradual, and it literally, like, I've only found people in the past. When was COVID 2 years ago? When did that kick off? Like the pandemic?
Don't know. The time slips away and add a year onto it, whatever it is.
Kicked off, and it was because I was still doing things myself. Like I would do lower grade scrambling, lower grade winter routes, and just solo stuff. Because I didn't have people to climb with, because people that I grew up with didn't do this, and I hadn't really met a new group of people to do it with. And it was only, I think, during like lockdown, I made the effort. That was like I want to connect with people so I've obviously I was posting my photos to Instagram and stuff, and you were meeting people and other photographers. But when the first restrictions lifted, I made the effort to try and connect with these people and go out to walk with them and stuff like that. And started being involved in like photo shoots for like brands and stuff, and that was kind of cool. But like it's only been in the last 2 years that I'd say I'm part of a community, or I've got a community, and I'm not the cool guy. I'm not the cool kid in the climbing gym. I'm never going to be. I'm not like up in 80s or anything like that. But I found a group of people that I can trust and that I like and that I enjoy their company, and my life's better for it. So, but it was gradual. It's new to me. It's like the past year or so, really.
And do you feel you're able to kind of open up and talk to that community? The people you're close to now, do they know exactly where Adam came from?
To varying degrees.
Yeah.
Like Oz knows a bit on my skeletons. Yeah, like there's, and that's it. Like you read and you gauge situations, but I think generally people that you're putting yourself in those situations with, you generally have to trust them anyway. So
I met you about a year ago now, probably just over a year ago, and your social media handle, if you like, was Adam Campbell. And then recently, a few months ago, you changed that, or you updated it, let's say. Where did that come from? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's what it seems very melodramatic, doesn't it? I was like, I didn't mean it to be something like that.
No, I think it was relevant, and I think it kind of shows maybe you're comfortable with yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, well, because that was it, and like we said it earlier, like I wouldn't even talk about race or like 2 years ago, and again that was something that come from or come during lockdowns, like when the George Floyd was murdered. You saw a lot of people standing up and talking, and there was a lot of accounts of people talking about race and talking about their experiences with racism. And there was a few like prominent accounts in the UK. So one was the Hill Walking Hijabi, and Black Girls Hike was another one, and they were kind of talking about their experiences and getting people outdoors, and it was quite empowering. And it was the first moment that I was like, why am I ashamed to admit, like, or talk about, not necessarily talk about my experiences, but I was ashamed to admit to even my friends, like, my actual heritage. So that was the first time where I actually kind of confronted it, and I guess I was kind of empowered by seeing other people standing up and being themselves and talking about their experiences. So yeah, I guess I confronted it and just gradually started talking about it and to an extent emulating what they were doing. And yeah, so my social media handle. So I always used my mum, like from probably the age of like 13, was using, outside the school, was using my mum's maiden name, which was Campbell. Again, just to distance myself from my Pakistani heritage, because my dad's second name was Raja. And that was something that I just carried on, even like when I'd left that lifestyle, because I became known as Adam Campbell to a lot of my friends. So yeah, my social media handles were Adam Campbell. And just as, I mean, I've not got a huge following by any means, but even just like if I think about my nephews, I was like, how can I stand up and talk about diversity and inclusion and being proud of your heritage when I'm ashamed to use my real name? So it was, the more I started talking about these things, I was like, am I a hypocrite? So, I mean, it made sense to just change my handles to my real name.
And what was the feedback? How did you find it?
I mean, it was really positive. It was really positive, which was nice, because I didn't expect it not to be nice. I mean, social media can obviously be really, really toxic. But no, like, people were really supportive, which was really nice. And again, you had that sort of community of outdoors people commenting and just saying nice things. So it was nice. It was nice.
Do you still experience any negative feedback? I don't know, maybe that's not the right word about racially, I suppose.
I mean, on day to day, no. I think there's been, I mean, Glasgow's not a perfect city, and
I don't think there is one. I think
Yeah.
we've talked about. I've talked about this with many people, and how Glasgow is perceived as a rough city, and I think I think every city has its rough elements.
Yeah,
but
it depends where you go. But
yeah,
I think one of the things, and I think it's where a lot of the racism in Glasgow stems from, is from the amount of social inequality and disparity that you get. So many people are in situations where they're unhappy. There's so many people in poverty. There's so many people with addiction and suffer alcoholism, and people are unhappy, and it feels good to have someone else that is below you. At least, even if it's superficial, and if at least it feels that way. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, or someone else that you can blame your problems on. Because whether it was the Pakistanis, because after us it was the Polish that got it. You know, like the narrative, the stealing job narrative was actually, I mean, it's a joke now, but it was, you heard it a lot. So on the day to day, I generally don't, but there's been environments or certain pubs I've been in where you've heard things being said, but I know for a fact there's certain pubs in Cumbernauld that if I went to, I would get the same type of comments, because the same people I used to sit with in those pubs are still there. But generally,
they haven't moved on.
Yeah, and I think, well, that's it. And like, these people are still in the same situation they were when I've moved on. But I think there's been a lot of progress. I like to think there has been, because my nephews, although they're like mixed race again, so they're even lighter skinned than me, like I can pass for white now, which is a bizarre experience, because I'm like, I don't like I was like, I get called Packy too many times for you to think I'm white. So it's funny how it's like reversed now.
Yeah. So you want to get out, you want to
I want you to recognise it now, because it was a struggle back in the day. But my nephews, like, they've obviously got the same second name, so they're Raja. And I've asked them, like, have you ever had any issues with that? And they've said no. But Cumbernauld is much more diverse than it was as well, than when I was growing up there.
I'm glad you brought up your nephews, because you talked about them earlier, or you talked about your eldest nephew earlier. Do you feel that you've been able to be that mentor, that person to look up to?
Yeah, I think I have. Which is cool.
From knowing you for the short time that I have, I think that I hope they have.
I mean, like anyone, I'm not a perfect human, and there isn't one, but I try to be the best representation of myself around them, and I'm always trying to be the best version of myself that I can be. So I think so, and Do you know what was really cute? Like, so my younger nephew, he like I was doing the modelling for like the Berghaus.
Oh, we'll get onto that, don't worry.
Yeah, for the Berghaus kit, which was such a cool opportunity and experience. And my sister was actually just looking at jackets, and I was on the website, and she was looking at women's jackets, but it like shows you the recommended stuff. And my younger nephew was next to her, and he's like, "Is that Adam?" And she's like, "Yeah, do I see them?" And she showed him. He's like, "That's so cool." And I was just like, that was so cute.
Proud uncle moment.
Yeah, I was like, oh man. And she sent me a text, and he's like, I had the biggest smile ever. So stuff like that. And then that's a younger nephew. My older nephew, like, he's at that sort of teenage, moody, difficult age. But I always try to be the mediator. Like when he's having a difficult situation with his sister, I try to be the cool, reasonable uncle. And like climbing, when he was up for it, I was taking him climbing like every week where we're going at one point. Now it's harder to get him out of the house every week. But no, I'm trying to do stuff like that with them, and just expose them to different things. And one thing we did actually that was really cool. I sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet here.
Go for it. This is your time to shine.
But we went climbing, and like I've been chatting with him, and actually he texted me. So ever since like we've just been talking about, anytime we started talking about like jobs and stuff like that, I was like, what do you want to do? And chatting about that with him, and he's always been interested in games and games development, so we've chatted about that sort of thing and what the options are and how would you get into that. But he texted me out of the blue, and he was like, hey, could we hang out and look at universities, because he's turning 16 now, so he's thinking about his hires and stuff. And I was like, I was so proud to just see him make that decision for himself. So like we went climbing, we went to GCC, Glasgow Climb Centre, I had a climb, then went home, ordered a pizza and just sat and looked up at universities and noted down sort of grades that we'd need to get for the courses that he was interested in. And that's the thing, like, so hopefully he gets those grades if he's interested, and that's what he really wants to do. University isn't the only option by all means, but it's really nice to see him take that initiative and have that goal and what to do.
You'll be the next Raja to go to university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what's funny? My sister as well, so she's worked in the tax office and she left high school. Nothing wrong with that, like the job, but she did it to pay the bills and
look after the kids,
yeah, she had 2 sons to raise. But she always wanted to do something else, but she's finally taken the step, so she started college to go and do nursing at uni, so they're probably going to be uni at the same time.
Oh, he'll love that.
She has to go to a specific uni for nursing, and some of the courses he wants to do is at this uni, so they might be at university together. So
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
I will have went to uni, but it's nice, and it's super, I don't know, it was such a relief, because I was so concerned about him.
Well, that's it. You talked about how he's in potentially the same situation you were in just years later. And did he know, obviously you said when he was much younger he was there, and visited you. Does he know the full story? Does he?
Nah, it doesn't.
No.
So I've told he's not stupid. He's a very smart young man. And I'm a bit rough around the edges.
Does he listen to podcasts?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm going to talk to him soon, because I've been working on the Berghaus project with Coldhouse.
We'll be talking about that in a second.
I want him to see that, but I don't know. I didn't want him to hear something bad about me, and think it was a cool thing, or look up to that and think it was something, I don't know, to aspire to. And then too, I didn't want him to view me badly. Like, I love him, and like, yeah, I just, like I said, I wanted to be that good role model for him. So,
we've touched on it a couple of times. You're now a supermodel for Berghaus.
You know it, baby.
So yeah, recently with the new kit that's coming out, you have, if you go onto the Berghaus website for the Extreme kit, you
see
are
me and my bass layers.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody needs to see that. Nobody needs to see that.
And you've had the opportunity to do a film, and we'll mention Matt from Coldhouse Collective, Coldhouse Collective are putting a series of films together, and you are the topic of one of them.
Yeah.
And that's Will by the time this goes out, will have been out at Kendal Mountain Festival,
Yeah.
and that will have been out to the world. How does that feel, telling your story on such a huge platform with a massive brand, with such a Coldhouse Collective, Matt Pycroft being the stature that they are? How does that?
Yeah, it's daunting and it's a bit surreal. Very surreal. Like Pycroft's one of my heroes. Like that guy's a legend. You know what I mean? And Berghaus are a brand. Like it's funny, but I've got such a long history with Berghaus. Like,
Yes,
you know
I think we're going to. Yeah, we'll touch on this now. Yeah.
Like Berghaus Mera Peak jackets were essential fashion. Like they were the height of fashion in Glasgow in the 90s and 90s, back to 80s even. I think like
They were and for anybody that doesn't know Glasgow's terms, they were the BAM jacket of the that was required. So BAM being a chav or a non-educated delinquent, a Ned. You had to wear a Mera Peak or you weren't cool.
Yeah, you weren't in the gang unless you had one, and it was like the red one or the blue one.
Yeah.
But so I had the blue. Actually, I think I had both. Did I? I had different ones at different points.
You must have been cool.
Scheme hopper. But it was so cool to go full circle and go from like a decade and more so ago wearing those Berghaus jackets in amongst the concrete, amongst deprivation and a very different life and lifestyle to
a negative environment.
Wearing it in the mountains for its true purpose, and go full circle like that. It's pretty cool. It's been a cool opportunity, and the whole experience, I don't know, because I hadn't stopped and looked back and confronted it and thought and looked at the journey and how far I've come. I mean, there's been moments, but it wasn't until that project and chatting with Matt that I'd actually stopped for a minute and took note and looked back and had that sort of exhale and being like, okay, you have got out of that. So it's been really, I don't know, therapeutic as well. And yeah, a cool experience. Like we went back to Cumbernauld and visited some of the areas. We literally visited the scene where that incident, like what happened with Brian and Rambo. And the whole time I was there, I was just like, I have become so soft.
So Matt's caught that in the camera, in the film.
Yeah,
you've been back in Cumbernauld
for the first time. Yeah.
So I remember when you were in Cumbernauld, and I saw it on social media, and there was a comment you made on your social media that you went to see your Gran, and you ugly cried. I think was the was the comment on there.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of background on that?
Are you trying to make me ugly cry right now?
Well, it's good for the camera, isn't it? No, I suppose it's how does your family look on where you are now compared to where you were back then?
Yeah, like they're super proud of me, which is nice. Like Matt I think he asked me like 10 times during that film, and he's like, "Are you proud of yourself?" And I was like, "No," because proud, like I don't know. Pride's something I feel. I'm proud of my nephew. I'm proud of Oz. Oz has been 1 year sober, for example. It's things that you feel towards other people for achievements. I think the negatives from my past are still very much on my conscience, and they were, no matter what the influences were, they were still decisions that I made that I'm not happy about. But I am happy that my mum's proud of me, and that my nephews are proud of me, and that my gran's proud of me. And I'm so happy that, I was able to do that and make them proud through, through hard work and through my actions.
Well, that's what I was going to ask was, are they proud of you, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm stoked that they're proud of me. I mean, that's true rehabilitation and true escape, I think, from it, when you've managed to not necessarily change the or opinions of people, but because they were worried for a long time. My mum was worried for a long time because you don't just get out and wake up and be like, right, I'm a good boy now. It takes time and it's hard.
So, if you're not able to say that you're proud of yourself now, what do you think it's going to take for you to feel like that? What do you think you need to achieve?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd ever say I was proud of myself. I don't know. It's probably just something. I don't know. It's just That's a weird.
Let's put a different spin on the question. What will it take for you to come, or are you, and if you're not, what will it take for you to come to terms with the demons that have been before, like the bad stuff that you've done before? Have you come to terms with that?
I'm at peace to an extent. Like, my life's good now. My mum is happy now, but you can't ever take away like the damage that you did, or the pain that you've caused, or the trouble. So in a way, I kind of always hope it lingers and that it's always on my mind, because it's my motivation today to keep pushing forward and to keep improving. But yeah, I think it's probably something I need to get better at, because it's not healthy, I don't think, but I am my own worst critic, or my own harshest critic.
We're all kind of guilty of that. But so, if we were to ask your mum now, do you think that she has, let's say, forgiven? I suppose is a better word. Has she forgiven you or do you feel that you've reconciled for what you put her through back in the day?
Yeah, 100%. Like,
okay.
It's just not, yeah.
Well, I think you should be proud of that.
Would you say you're proud of yourself with things? It's weird, isn't it? Though? It's weird.
Yeah,
like,
I totally get it.
I think it's a Glaswegian thing as well. It's like we're so self-deprecating. Okay, I guess so. And like, yeah, it's nice. It's good. It's good to be able to see it from that, and I'm so happy. And I think it's been. Back to the ugly crying thing like that.
I'm looking forward. Did we get that in film? Because I'm looking forward to see that.
Yeah.
Good.
I ugly cry more often than I'd like to admit these days. Like, it's been happening to me a lot, and again, I think that's.
Come on, for the camera.
I think that's part of that. Leaning back or how did you phrase it? What was the word you used? But not rediscovering yourself, but
reinventing.
Yeah, or like essentially like being back in touch with who I was, and because I was that sensitive kind of child, and I'd hid my emotions for so long, and regardless of my mum knowing the worst outcomes of the lifestyle I was living, she doesn't know all the details and all the things that led up to making those decisions, and all the things that I came up against. And that's what sort of made that situation difficult, because we haven't sat around and had that discussion. And that was the first time we had. And it hurt me, because how do you frame that for your mum? Like, she doesn't know about the experiences I'm talking about in this. So when you've had these experiences from your mum then, like as a man today, like I don't want to hurt her and be like, yeah, I was getting the shit kicked out of me every week, every day, every other day, or getting bullied every day, and then the exposure to that lifestyle. So I don't know, it just kind of hurt not having to, but opening up to her about those experiences, and because in her eyes and for parents in general that have seen it from an outside, it's easy to look at the situation and boil it down to he hung around with the wrong crowd, but there's so many other factors that make you maybe want to hang around with the wrong crowd, or that pull you in there. And yeah, that was difficult to confront, and it's at least opened that dialogue with her, but there's probably parts of it I'd never want to share with her.
I think there's probably everybody's got that.
True.
And it's probably best. Sometimes it's best.
Yeah.
I do say it's good to talk, but I think maybe it sounds like you've come to terms with it. You've been able to share a lot of that with your mum and your gran. Do you feel better for it?
Yeah, I feel it. I mean, again, it felt that sort of therapeutic in some way, and that sort of relief. But yeah, there's just that tension because it's not something we completely ignored as a family. It was something that's because of the fortunate outcome that I'm in a better place now. We can almost joke about it, but we never dived into the details or discuss the details. But I think it will probably improve my mother and I's. Like, we've got a good relationship, but just to give her a better understanding of the situation as a whole, and yeah, hopefully deepen and made our relationship better, I guess.
So now you are an awesome climber, awesome photographer, gorgeous model.
Master of nothing.
And you're also working for your market manager for Protect Our Winters, which is a pretty awesome job, I would have thought. Yeah, like to be involved in that. How you finding that?
Super rewarding. Like, I love my job, and it's such a worthwhile cause. And I think, like, when I first saw that, it's so rare that you get to align like your values with your interests, which is the outdoors and outdoor sports, and then your education and your skills as well, and to align all those, I'm pretty fortunate. And at the same time, it's difficult because you're sort of faced and have to confront the reality or the severity of the climate crisis every day, and that's something, you know, we can get apathetic towards, because it's not an easy or a nice thing to confront, but I think it's something that we'll have to.
When you see the destruction or the retreat of the glaciers and the snow,
tangible.
To watch that as a winter lover, it's soul destroying.
And that's that. I mean, it's to an extent that's sort of, it's almost superficial when you think of it from that extent, because like for us, it's the receding glaciers maybe means the ski season's different or shorter or whatever, but there's communities beneath that glacier that don't have drinking water. And the scariest fact or bit of info that for me to come to terms was the glaciers are melting at a crazily fast rate. Like, every year they're dropping meters, some of them. I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on that, but you can Google it and you can see the images and you can find the research papers. But those glaciers took hundreds of thousands of years to form. They don't come back.
Yeah.
So they're gone, and they're disappearing for good. So, you know, it is really daunting. But I think the empowering thing is that, you know, I'm working in a role where we're trying to do something about that, and there's hope in that, and there's still time. So I feel very, very fortunate to be part of that.
No, I'm sure. And we talked about the film, and that'll be out. It'll be out by now, hopefully, if Matt's edited it in time. But I suppose then for you, what does the future hold for Adam Raja?
What does the future hold? So climbing, lots of climbing, plenty of climbing. Don't know, some good views, some KFCs. I've kind of lost, Matt. We've not been to KFC for a while. You know, I don't know. I try not to set huge, lofty goals, but like I said, I just want to continue to grow, and I think one goal I'll always set myself is to try and be the best version of myself. So I'm always wanting to learn something new. I'm always wanting to improve. You know, I think I'll be disappointed the year that I don't look back in the previous year and I'm embarrassed or cringe at something I've said or done, you know, because I hope to be constantly learning and growing. And
well, hopefully there's nothing in this podcast.
I mean, there'll be plenty of stuff in this.
And I will soundbite it and I will share it on social media.
Edit it, make me sound eloquent, Photoshop me, make me look handsome.
Oh, well, you maybe need to do that.
But yeah, I don't know. I just want to continue, you know, to live a fulfilling life and do things I want to do, but I want to try and open the door for as many people behind me as I can as well. You know, and I think I would be a huge hypocrite, and I think it would be a tragedy if, and that's what influenced my work, but for me to benefit from the outdoors and for me to reap all of the benefits from this without trying to preserve that or offer
pay it back to the community.
Others. So, you know, my life's comfortable now. I don't need a Lamborghini. I don't need fancy things. I just want a comfortable life where I'm doing things that I enjoy doing with people that I like doing, and I'm doing that right now. So if I can continue to do that and then offer that to other people, like, hopefully I can continue to do that in the future.
So if you were to be selfish, what would be say it was a trip or a peak or whatever, what's the goal?
I got trips in mind. What was the one I sent to you today? That's a trek. That's not even a mountain.
What is it, 70k?
170 kilometres. It's like the trek round the whole of Mont Blanc Massif. It's like a trek round it.
Is that the one that the Ultra Trail to Mont Blanc
I think so.
goes on?
Run it. So is that why you were late for
That's why I said when you asked me,
okay.
I was like, no.
So I saw that, but like
The Trail de Mont Blanc.
That's it.
I love Scotland. I love the mountains here. There's plenty of what to do. Like we just did the Cooling, and it was the Cooling Traverse, and it was amazing. But there's so many routes. Like this winter, I want to do Curved Ridge in winter. We're doing Annakeegic. I want to do all these routes, but I also selfishly do want to go to the Alps. So hopefully next season, that's going to happen. And I'm not sure really. I've done nothing at high altitude, so I don't even know if I can stomach it. But hopefully, me and Oz next year will get on some alpine climbing, and if not, we can do the 170k trek run it below. But,
I don't know if Oz is into it, if I'm honest.
But yeah, and I just want to. I want to see the world. I want to see places like seeing the mountains in Scotland was amazing. I've seen the Alps in pictures, and that blows my mind. So I'd like to see some mountains around the world.
No, fair enough. I think before we sign off at the moment, we'll just
He's trying to get me drunk.
hear. It's well, yes.
Cheers, mate.
Slange.
Slange.
Something like that. I think on that note, and obviously Oz has been involved there, I think we need to get Oz in.
Yes.
So in a second, well no, I think we'll all three of us, if we can work this out, we'll all get in. So you know I'm not normally one for doing an outro. I try to do it within the chat, but I just wanted to jump in here because the chat with Adam went on for nearly 2 hours, which was great in my opinion. It really flowed. So did the alcohol. That might have helped. So because of that, I don't want to extend the episode even more. And Ozzy's episode, which we did have a really good chat, I want to do as a separate episode. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, comment, like, everything else that goes along with it. Please share on any of your social medias, and I will be back soon with Ozzy's episode.